Okay. So here's how this is going to work, guys. I'm just going to start at the beginning of the unit and move through it. Okay, going over the key concepts and what you're going to have to be able to do, how I'm going to ask about them on the test. Then we'll go into some detail about numbers of questions and marks and stuff like that that are on the test. Then you'll get your review package, and then you can ask some questions. All right. So first thing that we covered, okay, was the structure / history of the atom. Okay, so we talked about, in that lesson, we talked about why the model of the atom has changed. Okay, and that is something that is very important for you to understand because it's a good example of the scientific method, okay, working. Right? We have an idea, we do experiments, they don't fit, the results of those experiments don't fit with our idea, so our idea has to be modified. Okay, that's how science progresses. Okay, that was sort of the big theme that was supposed to come out of that. Okay, so we're looking at here, that's sort of the scientific process, we'll say. Right, now, if you're describing that, you would probably want to say, well, what initially Dalton said it was a solid sphere, and then, Thomson discovered electrons, and we had plum pudding and all that kind of stuff. Okay, yeah, that's certainly important. Recalling the guys' names and what they did, not as important as the process itself. Okay? So, if I'm going to ask you to describe something, is that going to be a multiple choice or a written response item? Probably a written response item. So this scientific process of the sort of development of our idea of the atom or model of the atom would probably be a written response item. All right? The remainder of the stuff in that lesson, okay, the models themselves. All right, so like solid sphere, okay, etc. Where would I ask about those? Multiple choice, yeah. I mean, easiest way for me to ask something like that would be to show you a picture and say, which model is this, or what was the strength or weakness of this model, A, B, C, or D, something like that. Okay. So yeah, you do need to sort of know the models. Okay. Again, because you're just going to have to recognize. Do you need to necessarily memorize? Okay, Thomson was plum pudding and Dalton was solid sphere. Do you have to necessarily memorize that, or if you went over it, would you be able to recognize the proper answer? Yeah, probably. And that's how you study for multiple choice. You don't necessarily have to commit 100% to memory as long as you'd be able to pick out the proper one from the four. All right. There's always tips and hints in there. All right. And of course, if I show you something that has electrons flying around it, solid sphere is probably not the right answer. Okay, or plum pudding for that matter. Yeah. Okay. So things like that. Just process of elimination. Other things here would be then the structure of the atom itself. Okay, and I would probably be looking at your understanding of that, not necessarily that you can memorize that the electrons are outside and the protons and neutrons are in the nucleus. Not that that isn't important, but okay, I would be looking more for understanding here. Maybe asking you to extrapolate to maybe drawing a picture of an atom. All right, I might give you, say, draw me a picture of beryllium. All right, and so then that would tell me, okay, does he know how to use his periodic table or her periodic table, all right, to find the number of protons, and do they understand that the number of neutrons is the atomic mass minus the atomic number, and do they understand that in an atom electrons and protons are present in equal numbers, things like that. Okay, so it's a checking of your understanding. No, mostly I'd be looking for, one of those two models for sure, because they're the ones that we currently accept. But mostly I would be looking for, did you arrange the electrons at least in an acceptable fashion with the proper number? But if it's a cloud, it could be, right, they can be anywhere kind of. As the big thing would be, can you demonstrate to me an understanding of how do I get the right number of everything? And then are they in the right place? Okay, so again, understanding and being able to use the periodic table to do that. Okay, so that's showing me your understanding of that. And that's it for lesson number 1. Okay. And the second thing we went over was what? Right, ionic and molecular compounds. Okay, we talked about their bonds. Okay, so probably, okay, so ionic versus covalent. Okay, covalent meant that they're sharing, okay, the electrons, and that's obviously for your molecular compounds. Again, that's probably more of a recognition or a recall type of item, which means it's going to be multiple choice. Okay, so as long as you kind of review that enough to have a basic recognition ability or understanding of it, and then after that, it was almost entirely naming. Now, am I going to ask you, here's a formula of a compound, give me its name? Yes, I am. Is that going to be a written response item worth 5 marks? No. Okay, where am I going to ask that? I don't do fill in the blank. It's going to be multiple choice. Okay, I'll say, here's a formula. Let's say it's, I don't know, FeCl3. Give the name of this compound. Well, now you got to look at that compound and go, okay, iron's a multivalent metal. That means it needs a Roman numeral, and I got to figure out its charge. There's 3 chlorines, so iron must be 3. It is showing me, can I do the naming stuff? Can I make a formula from a name? I'm going to ask you probably 4 or 5, okay, in the multiple choice naming questions. All right? But is naming more important than just getting those 5 marks in the multiple choice? Where else is naming important? Molar masses? Well, not so much balancing, but for certain writing them out in words, yes. Writing out reactions in words, naming is important. All right, we have to be able to get those. Or if I give you the reaction in words, that you can write it in formula form. Okay, so those things, certainly naming, okay, have to be able to do that. Very simple. Okay, be able to. It's important for lots of different things. All right, it's one of those fundamental skills that you have to have. All right, so yeah, like we said, naming, got to be able to do that. Got to have the ability to get those reactions right, okay, and things of that nature. After we did the naming, okay, we went on to, well, it was actually lesson 4, but it was the properties of compounds, and we did a lab on that. Okay. Would it be important for you to be able to explain to me possibly how you would separate several unknown compounds or identify several unknown compounds? Yeah. I mean, if we did a lab on that, it's an important skill. So being able to, use your knowledge of the properties of ionic compounds and molecular compounds to identify something is going to be pretty important. It could still be a multiple choice item. I could still set it up that way, but it could also be a written response situation as well. All right? But since we did a lab on it, I guarantee it's on there. All right? We never do a lab on something unless it's really important. All right? So certainly properties of compounds, things to remember. Okay? Whoop, not ionic. That's supposed to be an N. Ionic. Okay, what are some properties of ionic compounds? Just a quick list here. Okay, conduct electricity when? Right, in solution. By the way, E with a negative is electrons. That's what electricity is, shorthand. Okay, conduct electrons or electricity in solution. What else? Crystalline solids. What else? Are they generally pretty soluble? Yes. Okay, anything else? Maybe 3 in particular? copper, right? Nickel, cobalt, and copper are brightly colored. Okay, remember those ones. Okay, red for cobalt, blue for copper, and green for nickel. Okay, and then for molecular compounds, okay, any state, right? Solid, liquid, or gas. Okay, non-conductive. Okay, generally near neutral, right? They're not really extreme pHs where ionic ones can be because you're strong acids. Okay, and that might be something to remember, right? Okay, pH, well, pH is less than 7. Okay, whereas if you have OH, you're a base, pH greater than 7. Okay, things like that. That's less than and greater than. People are looking at that funny, right? 1 is less than 7. Yeah, okay. You guys remember that from elementary math? Okay, maybe they stopped teaching that. I don't know. Okay, so those would be things that you would probably want to go over. I would say good thing to do, read over lesson 4. Don't memorize a bunch of stuff from lesson 4 or anything like that. Just read it over to review those kind of important properties. Have another look at your lab, especially your analysis, okay, and see if you can remember your thought process that you were going through when you were trying to figure out that, you know, G was water and E was, or whatever they were, okay. That's kind of a similar thought process that you may be asked to go through, okay, on the exam. Now, I would of course give you enough information to identify those compounds, all right. They would be like fake observations that I would give you, right. Okay, and then after that, what are we on now for? We talked about solubility. Okay. Is terminology going to be important here? Yes. Okay. And not because I'm going to ask you for the definition of a precipitate. I'm not. But do you need to know that terminology in order to answer other questions? Yes. Okay. You definitely need to know if I'm talking about a solvent or a solute, okay, what I mean, because it could affect your ability to understand the question and thus get it right. So certainly terminology is important, and there was a lot of that in there. Okay, using your solubility chart. Okay, there are a couple of multiple choice questions that simply say, here's a reaction. Tell me which if any of the products are soluble. Right? Those are a great way to see whether you know how to use your solubility chart or not. Okay, and they're quick. And then I will tell you that there is a written response item that will be applying your skills in using that solubility chart. Okay, we sometimes call that a practical application question. Okay, where I would give you a situation involving using your solubility chart and then being able to sort of expand from there and see if you can take the ball and run with it. All right. So it may not be something that we specifically talked about or did in class, but it is based on the stuff we did in class, and you'll have to use your higher level thinking skills to answer that question. All right, so be aware that, yeah, you're definitely going to want to go over the solubility stuff, okay? And this written response item may also involve double replacement reactions. Okay. In that same lesson, but we'll treat it separately, we talked about the polar nature of water. Okay. And I'm going to ask about that. I mean, partially there'll be some recall stuff. What does polar mean? Things like that. But there's also going to be some, again, explain yourself. Apply your knowledge of what does it mean to be a polar molecule. What is a polar molecule? All right. This is a written response item. Okay, about the polar nature of water. Okay. So you do need to go over the notes on lesson 8. Okay, and review so that you understand and remember what a polar molecule is. Okay, and that has to do with that uneven sharing of electrons, so one end becomes negative and one end becomes positive, and that means things like hydrogen bonds can form, and that can cause, anyone remember the two things that it causes? And they both end in adhesion. Adhesion, okay? Look at the notes on that kind of stuff, okay? So terminology, again, going to be important there. Got to be able to use those terms in their proper context. Then we went on to reactions. Okay, spent probably a quarter of the unit on this. Okay, maybe more like a third. Okay, on chemical reactions. Got to know the 5 types, obviously. Is it possible I'd ask a multiple choice question that said, which of the following is a double replacement reaction? Yeah. I mean, it's a quick and easy 1-mark question that shows me whether you remember or not. But knowing the 5 types is more important when you're being asked to do what? Well, not so much balance, but solve a reaction, predict the products. Okay, got to be able to know the 5 types in order to know what's going to happen on that side. So with reactions, most of this is going to be skill-based, which means it's going to be, I mean, yes, there's some in the multiple choice, but the stuff that's really big marks is in the written response, and that is doing exactly what we've done in class on worksheets, quizzes, and your assignment that you handed in today. Right? That is balance reactions. Write them out in words. Okay, predict the products in balance, identify the types. Okay, all that stuff. All right, so yeah, so we'll say got to be able to balance. Okay, predict. Write out in words or formulas. Okay, and obviously identify types. Okay, it's going to be important as well. If there's one thing on the test worth more marks than anything else in this unit, it's this. All right, I don't remember exactly how many marks it was, but in going over the test when I made up the key, it was significantly weighted in the reaction's favor. Reason for that is, in doing a chemical reaction, you have to show me basically all the other skills too. All right, naming compounds and stuff like that. All of that is part of it, so that's why there's so many marks involved with it. So if you're going to study one thing, but study more than one thing. Okay. But if you were just to study one thing, it had better be reactions. All right, that would be the most important thing on there. All right, so it doesn't seem like a lot when we write it like this, but we know how much time we spent on this. All right, now you guys are all pretty good at that, but still you want to practice that and be sure you're ready. Okay, and like I said, the questions are going to be very similar to what was on your reactions assignment. Okay, there'll be ones that you know, like they'll be of the 5 types. There won't be any of the kind of odd ones like you might have had on the assignment there, but they will be, okay, of, let's say, moderate level difficulty. Not the hardest ones I can think of, but not gimmies either. No. All right, and then lastly, the mole equation. Yeah, that's what we've been working on the last couple of days. Right, that is definitely going to be problem solving. There's virtually nothing in the multiple choice about the mole. Okay, so problem solving, n equals little m over big M, and I've told you already, there's only 4 ways for me to ask the mole. All 4 are on there. Okay, I think there's 16 marks on the exam to do with the mole. Okay, is it important when you're doing this to do this? Definitely. All right. You know, on an exam, sometimes your anxiety gets the best of you and you make calculation errors, get shaky hands, you know, you mess something up on the calculator. All right. You want to show me that you're just clumsy and you still know how to do it and get 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5 if that happens. All right. So please make sure to show all of your work just like we did in the examples, okay, in class. Okay. That's what there is, guys. Okay, that's the stuff that's on there. Now, give you some details here in terms of numbers of questions, marks, etc. Okay, so we are looking at 33 multiple choice questions, but most of them go pretty quickly because there's not a lot of, you know, calculating or thinking or anything to do with them. They're mostly recall stuff, so they'll go very quickly. And then there are 51 marks in the written response. Okay, so the whole test is out of 84. You'll be given the mole equation, okay, and you'll be given Avogadro's number on the front page of the test. You can use your periodic table, so remember to bring it on Monday. Okay, you can use your periodic table on the test. Okay, things to think about for multiple choice. Oh, that I forgot to talk about here. Sorry, 2 things we forgot about. Chemical and physical properties / changes. Okay, because we did talk about those a couple of times. So make sure you know the difference between a chemical and a physical property and a chemical and physical change. Okay, because we talked about those in lesson 4 and then again in lesson 12 when we talked about chemical reactions. Okay, and experimental design. Okay, what I mean by that is one of the skills that you've been asked to show in this unit several times is to be able to determine what's the responding variable, what's the manipulated variable in this experiment, what are the controlled variables in this experiment. Expect that, okay? There's going to be a couple of multiple choice questions regarding the design of an experiment. So they'll be situational. I'll give you, describe an experiment and ask you what's the manipulated variable, what's the responding variable, etc. Okay. All right, so we already talked about a lot of solubility stuff in there. Okay, like homogeneous versus heterogeneous. Okay, again, that's terminology. We talked about that on the board already. Acids versus bases, that's that properties of compound stuff we talked about. Structure of the atom we talked about. Okay, naming we said would be in there. You know, the process of the atom changing, that kind of stuff. All right. For the written response, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 6 written response items. Now, several of those have like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay. Well, it's balancing. Okay, the balancing question has A through G because it's 7 reactions to balance, right? And then obviously I told you you're going to have to identify reactions, predict products, okay, that kind of stuff, right? So there's 16 marks on predicting products, balancing reactions, etc. 7 marks on just balancing reactions. Okay, atomic structure we said was going to be in there, and then there are actually, yeah, and there are 4 mole questions. Okay, and I told you the application question about solubility and water. Right, so that's what's in there. And there's a bonus question too, but it won't make any sense to tell you about it until you actually have the test. So. All right, now some things to think about. This is your first high school science test, so preparing well for it. Okay, some things you're probably going to want to do, right, or think about at least while you're getting ready. Simply reading over your notes isn't going to get it done, right? Reading over your notes is fine if all you have are recall-based multiple choice questions. Obviously, part of the test is based on that. So you do need to read your notes over, but it's not the only thing you should do. You need to practice your skills, because most of the marks on the exam, 51 of them, are based on your skills. Okay? And skills don't get better by reading about them. They get better through practice. All right? You don't become a great soccer player by reading a book about how to kick a ball. Okay? You get to be a better soccer player by practicing. All right? And it's the same with balancing reactions, predicting reactions, etc. Okay? Reading about it won't make you better at it. Practicing it will. Do you have a whole bunch of worksheets from me that you could practice with? Yes. Plus you're going to get that review package that has a few more, and they are old exam questions. All right? In fact, most of the review package is exam questions from exams I no longer use. Okay. So practice stuff for sure. Read stuff over. Look at your labs. All right, we've already said that there's questions based on the labs. Look at your quiz marks. Okay, go into PowerSchool. Look at your quizzes. If there was a quiz you didn't do well on, what should you do? Yeah, you can come talk to me, but short of that, since today's the last day you would have a chance to do that before your test, because we don't have scheduled help tomorrow on Friday, is you watch the podcast of that one. Okay. Now remember that that's set up for you in PowerSchool. Okay. If you look at it on your phone, right? If you open up a single task on your phone, come on. Okay, so if you open up a single task, okay, on PowerSchool, it looks something like this, and you'll see down at the bottom, there's those links, okay? The first link is usually just to the quiz questions, which you may, if you've lost your quiz or you threw it out, never do that, by the way, okay? You can go to here and see the questions, and then there's always I always put a link to the podcast where we went over that quiz. Not a bad idea to have a look at those, because the same kind of questions are going to be on the test. Right? That's why we do those quizzes. They're for review, and they're to give you an idea of the level of difficulty I'm going to ask. Right? The questions on the test are no more difficult than the ones on your quizzes. In fact, they're pretty much the same because I lack creativity. All right? So not a bad idea to look those over, okay, and just you know, get a little extra review that way. Okay, now in terms of, like, you know, study habits, study skills, things like that, everybody's a little bit different. All right, but I've told you obviously for this one you want to practice as opposed to read. Okay, but more common sense stuff that people forget about. Obviously, cramming the night before isn't great. All right, I mean, it's better than nothing, but only very marginally better. Right? Preparing a few days in advance, okay, for just a few minutes a day is far better because your brain has a chance to process that stuff multiple times before the exam. Getting a good night's sleep. The value of that is absolutely critical. Right? If you cram till 3 o'clock in the morning and then go to bed and you have to get up 4 hours later, you are not going to be ready for that test. All right? Because first off, your brain was tired while you were trying to cram stuff into it, which it wasn't remembering. Okay? Now you wake up in the morning, and you get that horrible, horrible feeling of you walk into this room and go, oh, I don't remember anything. Okay? That's what happens when you cram. You draw blank. Okay? There is nothing worse than that feeling. First 2 pages of the test are a write-off. Okay, at that point, because it takes you that long to get over your panic reaction. Okay? Don't cram. That's what will happen. I guarantee it. All right? So prepare a few days in advance, a few minutes a night. Obviously, you still want to do, a fair amount of studying Sunday night. Yes. But go to bed at a reasonable hour. Get 8 hours of sleep. Okay? Get up in the morning. Have a good breakfast. I know that you're looking at me like I'm crazy, but I'm telling you, this stuff is important. All right? I've seen people who come into a final exam in university and all they've had is black coffee and a cigarette. Okay? If your brain does not have fuel, is it going to work? No. Okay? You got to fuel it right. Okay? It's got to have sugars. And if it doesn't have sugars, it's going to fail you. Okay? So make sure you have a good breakfast. Can you bring food in here? Yeah. Okay? If you need a snack during an exam, do it. All right? We give for when you write your diplomas in grade 12, you get a little bag, like a little lunch bag, okay? And it sits on your desk during the exam, and it's got snacks and stuff in it. All right? Studies of the brain have showed, shockingly, that the brain needs fuel to operate properly. Okay? It also needs to be well hydrated. Okay? So bring some water if you need to. Okay? Be well hydrated. I wouldn't recommend like a Red Bull right before the test. I've seen the people that do that. Okay? And their desk shakes through the whole test. It's funny to watch, actually. Okay. But yeah, like you're nervous, you're jittery. Okay, yeah, you're all keyed up, you feel real good, but your brain's not operating at its optimum capacity anymore, despite what it says on the side of the can, right? Which is intended for extended periods of mental and physical alertness. You're very alert, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily very much smarter. Okay. Yeah, so just like I say, do the easy things, right? Getting a good breakfast, getting a good night's sleep are the easiest things to do well on a test. The night before, pack all your stuff. Okay? Have it all ready. Make sure you've got everything you need for the next day the night before, so you're not rushing in the morning. Okay? If you get into a mindset where you're rushed and panicked and, oh, where's my pencils and I can't find my periodic table, you come in here, you're already in that frame of mind. Is that the frame of mind you want to start a test in? No, it isn't. Okay? Now here's the last thing. I know a lot of you love to do this because I've seen you do it before quizzes. You come in here and you just pour over your notes for the last 5 minutes. Your brain's not absorbing any of that. Okay? It's not. Right? You are actually better off to come in the morning and just be relaxed. Okay? Your brain needs to process things for a certain amount of time before it will actually commit it to long-term memory. If you sit in here for 5 minutes before the test, you'll commit stuff to short-term memory. How long does short-term memory last? What was I talking about? That's how long it lasts. Okay? It's short-term memory. Unless you're constantly repeating it to yourself, it will not go into long-term memory. All right? So committing that stuff to short-term memory right before the test is probably not the best use of your last 5 minutes. Okay? In your last 5 minutes, take a few deep breaths, calm yourself, get zen, okay, and be ready for the test. All right? Little things like that, guys. All right, Mac. Yes, stimulates blood circulation to the head. You want to chew gum? Yeah. Okay. Works the muscles of the jaw, increases blood flow to the head. Any blood flow to the head goes to the brain. Always good. Okay. Or chewing and eating. Yeah. Same idea. Just don't spill anything on your test. You only get one. No, I have more, but okay. All right. So those are the things to think about. All right. Any questions that you have right now before I give you the review package? Anything you want to go over? Okay. Okay, so a lot of the stuff we just talked about, draw and describe the atomic models, explain why each was reasonable for the time, okay, and why it was eventually rejected. Okay, describe ionic compound, including how it's bonded together. So we talked about ionic versus molecular bonds. Okay, so those are those two there. Okay, name the following compounds, so a few of them to try for you. Write formulas for the following compounds, so some naming practice. Make up an example of each of the 5 reaction types we covered in class and balance them. Okay, write each of the reactions below in formula form, predict the products, and balance each of them. Write a paragraph that summarizes the law of conservation of mass and why it's important. List the points of Dalton's atomic theory. Okay, something we forgot to talk about there on the review, but that's an easy multiple choice type question. Would you agree? In that it has 4 parts. Okay, which of the following is not part of Dalton's atomic theory? Okay, something like that. And then some mole questions. Explain the properties of water. Told you that would be on there. Okay, and number 12 is an old practical application solubility question. Okay, that was on previous tests. Okay, so give you some idea of what I meant by that with that question there. All right, so that's, I know it doesn't look like much, but I mean, there's quite a bit on here. So some good stuff for you to practice. There is a key for it. Okay, and I'm pretty sure I put it on my website, but we'll just double check. Maybe not. Okay. I will. What's that? Key to chemistry exam review. Where'd you see that? Oh, right here. Yep. So it is there. All right. Key to for chemistry exam review. All right. It's right there. I think I just have the mole equation questions and the reactions on here. I don't have the names of those compounds and stuff because, well, quite frankly, you could Google that okay, and get those ones. So, yeah. So you got a fair amount of stuff there that you can use to practice over the weekend. Now, today is the last scheduled help you have before the exam. All right. So class today or scheduled help today is kind of your last chance to ask any questions because it's tough for me to answer them over email. The other thing to remember is that I forget it now. That's weird. It's a short-term memory problem. It'll come to me at some point. Oh, now I remember what it was. Mine like a steel trap. It's always closed. Okay. Don't get cocky. It's a lesson that my physics kids are going to learn today. Okay. They had an exam yesterday. And I say that because it's partially my fault. Every quiz you've had in this course so far, you got ahead of time. Is that the same or different than getting this exam where you've never seen the questions before? It's different, okay? And I think you get overconfident sometimes when oh, well, I've done so good on all my quizzes. Well, yeah, you've had a chance to directly prepare for the exact questions. You don't have that this time. Okay? Yes, you're preparing, but you don't know the exact questions ahead of time, and that does make it more difficult. All right, so make sure you're reviewing adequately because there aren't any rewrites, guys. Okay? We don't do rewrites here in science. Okay? If you don't do well, that's it. Okay? So you want to be ready the first time. So please make sure you take it seriously when you're preparing. Do the stuff that we've talked about today. All right, well, I'll let you have some time to start going over that stuff, and if there are questions that come up, please ask. All right, and we will go through them. Book them. Oh. Okay. All right, one other thing here, guys. A lot of people have been coming to me over the last couple of days here saying, you know, Mr. Cordero, I get the first 2 examples of the mole equation, no problem, but I don't get the last 2. All right, and I think what's happening here is people are just really confused as to when and how to use Avogadro's number. All right. Well, there's a formula for it, but the reason I haven't been just giving you the formula is I kind of expect you to just be able to figure that out mathematically. But the formula is essentially this, guys. Okay, number of particles equals, okay, Av's number times n. Okay, that's the formula for calculating number of particles. Now, what if I was given the number of particles and asked to find n? What would I do? Divide by Av's number. Okay, and that's exactly what we've been doing in class. I've just never written that formula out for you per se. All right, this formula isn't going to be given to you on the test because, again, it's something that I expect that you can figure out mathematically. Okay, but if you're afraid that you won't be able to figure it out mathematically, it's something that would be worth memorizing. Okay, Number of particles is 6.02 over n. 6.02 times 10 to the 23 over n. Or sorry, times n. Times n, not over n. Times n. Okay? As number times n. Okay? And you can manipulate that. If you need to get n, you just divide both sides by Av's number. Okay? Cancels, comes over here. Okay? Av's number, number of particles over Av's number gives n. Alright? So it's just simple formula, okay, to use three variables, same as what you kind of been using.